check out my YouTube and see if my stream is up. Oh, and that's nuts.
Yeah, go ahead. Anyone else on the chair?
Going well, going well.
Leave a couple of these stickers from New Orleans camp.
Oh, great.
If you want to.
Fantastic. When is New Orleans?
It's going to be in the fall. I don't have a date set yet.
Okay.
But they didn't give me enough stickers to put in all the bags. So.
Right on. Appreciate it, man. It's in the fall sometime.
Yeah, it's like 30 people last year. It's real small.
Oh, cool.
I'm trying to grow it.
Very cool. Well, yeah, man. Good luck. Well, thank you. Projector. How do I scale? Do you see it, Chris?
I see it. It's like
I'm trying to fix that. Oh.
Yep. And you're welcome to move the chair. That's like,
All right, so I've got to get started. Where are my notes? Is up? All right. Okay, guys, so let's go ahead and get started. Oh, red button pressing. All right, I think we're all set here. Okay, so today's talk for me is going to be Docker in a Flash, introduction to Drupal development with Docker. My name is Will Jackson, and I really, really like Drupal. I've been working professionally in the Drupal industry for about 8 years. I can honestly say that Drupal has positively shaped my life for the better. Coming to events like Drupal Camp Florida introduced me to the Drupal community, and coming to Drupal camps is a great way to meet the community just to see what it's all about. And putting on these events is a lot of hard work. And I just want to take a moment to definitely say thank you to everybody who makes Drupal Camp Florida possible. You guys are what make the Drupal community great. So I want to go ahead and give a round of applause for the guys who put on Drupal Camp Florida here. All right. So back to the presentation. A few disclaimers. This is the first time I'm doing this presentation, so hopefully it'll be good. There are also a lot of other Docker presentations. Just by a show of hands, did anybody go to the Docker training with Lisa Ridley yesterday? Yep, one, okay. Really good training. Lisa actually has another session later this afternoon, I think on the last slot for today. I definitely looked at her presentation trying to craft this one so it wouldn't overlap. There are certain things that we kind of have to talk about. I think in every single Docker presentation that you go through, you'll see some of the same charts and see some of the same explanations. So those are kind of unavoidable. But I'm definitely going to try to bring something unique to this presentation that hopefully everybody can benefit from. So it's going to be a good time. We're going to have a lot of fun. Oh, and one more thing too. I'm really, really tired. Noticed a few issues with a script that I want to show you guys later last night. Talk a little more about it later, but there was an issue with Terminus 1.0 updating, changing a lot of syntax. So realized that at like 1 a.m. last night when I was getting ready to go to bed. So that is accounting for why I'm so damn tired today. But yeah, so my name is Will Jackson. I work for a company called Canopy Studios. Okay, Canopy Studios. We're based in San Francisco, California. We're an open source website strategy design, development, and support agency. We specialize in data-driven intelligence solutions. Canopy is a fantastic company to be a part of. They have so many talented people, and I'm so lucky to work with such a talented group of people. We contribute modules. We sponsor events like Drupal Camp Florida, DrupalCon, and user groups all around the world. And plus, they make it possible for me to come here to share my passions with Drupal and Docker with you guys. So definitely appreciative for them. All right, so diving in, just a quick comparison. We want to talk about a few alternatives to Docker. So some of these alternatives kind of go back to traditional bare metal approaches. So we have things like WAMP, MAMP, XAMPP, LAMP's in this list too. More specifically talking about the install programs that you download online. It kind of handles Apache, MySQL, PHP all for you. LAMP's going to be more of a, you have your own server, you know how to install Linux, you know how to install Apache, you can go and install most of your packages on your own. Other options, we have VirtualBox and VMware, mostly VirtualBox in our industry is what you'll see. That's a virtualization approach. Similar to Docker, there's still levels of virtualization with Docker in some scenarios. Which is how they're handled is a little bit different. And that's what I want to do or what I want to talk about in one of our next slides here. But first I want to talk about bare metal. So we have the WAMP, XAMPP, MAMP, LAMP, and also Aqueduct Desktop. That is based on XAMPP. So it's XAMPP is cross-platform, Apache, MySQL, PHP, Perl. So it works with Mac, Linux, Windows, very easy to install, which is like the first pro with. Click, it's not even working. So one of the first pros. It's very easy to set up, mostly because it's well documented. It's the most common method people tend to follow when getting into development. It's really because it is really easy. It is cross-platform. It works with pretty much everything. You can install it on any operating system, really old operating systems with old hardware. One of the pros, why a lot of people use it. Getting into some of the cons. Onboarding time. This is a big one. This is going to be with new projects or loading in new sites. You get a new project, you need to get that into your MAMP, your XAMPP, your LAMP stack. There are some things you can definitely script that and makes it a little bit faster, but trying to repeat that every single time or have that perfect script to work with every single site doesn't always work. You have a little bit easier time if you're dealing with full builds, full sites, but if you're dealing with sites that maybe you didn't develop, maybe you're working with a support client, having a script to handle every one of the sites is very difficult to do, and also adds to a lot of your overhead. Another issue is a lack of sandboxing. And what I mean by sandboxing is you can't just roll. You can definitely roll new sites, but things tend to stick around. So I mean, if you have Drupal sites that you've managed, everybody's seen this before. It doesn't have to be Drupal. It could be WordPress or Joomla. But you have databases that stick around. You have files that stick around. File backups, file archives, those stick around. You can do a pretty good job of trying to actively keep on top of it, but there's some that always slip through the cracks. I mean, how many times have you actually sat down, you're out of space on your computer, and you're searching for that database, you're searching for that file archive where you know it's 8 gigs. You know you can get that 8 gigs back somewhere. That's sandboxing, or it's part of that. So it's just kind of hard to keep track of every single one of those, especially as you start working with more sites. So another issue would be different versions of software. So trying to maintain, for example, different versions of PHP. If you might have an old site for a client that's still running Drupal 6 because they don't want to upgrade to Drupal 8. Okay, well, it doesn't work too well in Drupal 7 with all the modules. You might need to maintain an older version of PHP. You could roll a new server. There's ways to do that with a traditional bare metal setup, but it's very, very complicated to do that, or it can become very complicated. Another issue is that the configuration is not really easily shareable, meaning that I have a developer, or I'm working with a developer on a project, and they need to set up the environment. Sure, I can write documentation, I can write you a script, but there's going to be something different between your development and the next guy. So, having something that is absolutely, unimpeachably the exact same environment is important. And it's also definitely difficult to replicate that in production environment too. You never want to find out that you just slipped a bug into your code and you just found out when you're deploying to production. So I mean, having an environment that closely matches that production environment is very important. In a bare metal setup or the traditional MAMP, XAMPP, that's hard to reproduce. So there's a good reason why people are looking for alternatives. Okay, so getting into some of the virtual solutions, we have VirtualBox and VMware. Again, VirtualBox is the more prominent. Talking about some of the pros, we do have different environments, so that is something that we can do now with virtualization. It's kind of resource intensive, but you can do it. You can have different images for different versions of PHP. If you want to have MySQL versus MariaDB or Apache versus Nginx, you could do that, but it's generally going to be pretty resource intensive, which actually kind of comes into the cons here. But another thing is too, you can isolate apps. Having that in its own image, its own VirtualBox is a nice way to kind of keep that separate from the rest of your machine. Whether it be for security reasons or just being able to quarantine everything with a project to a specific directory or a specific image. That's a benefit. It is cross-platform, so VirtualBox, you can download that, you can install it with on Linux, on Mac, on Windows. Fairly easy to use, very well documented, and it is shareable. So you can take these images, you can share it with other developers. There are some benefits there. It definitely is a step in the right direction coming from those traditional bare metal setups. And Vagrant. Vagrant's just cool. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can do with Vagrant. It definitely optimizes the overall the building of your development environment. And some people think it might be a little bit easier than Docker and less complex than Docker. I disagree personally, but I think part of the reason for that is just that there's a lot of ways you can use Docker. There's a lot of different applications on how that offer Docker, and just knowing what each one of these does and why you would want to use each specific one, I think kind of lends itself towards being why people think that Vagrant's a little easier. I don't know, I think Docker's easy. So that's a lot of fun too. All right, so talking about some of the cons. Switch cost. So what I mean by switch cost is switching between projects. Again, because the virtual environments are very resource intensive, meaning that they will demand a lot of memory. They will demand a lot of space. When you're not actually actively running that virtual environment, it's going to offload it into your hard drive, and you're going to start taking up space there. So it is very resource intensive, and you generally don't want to have multiple running at once. It's not that you can't do it. It's just that you're going to start noticing some significant performance degradation if you continue with adding more and more. So common practice is to spin one up, spin one down, keep it going that way. And operating system maintenance, because with a virtual environment, you have the entire operating system that is on that virtual environment image. So you have to maintain whether it be Ubuntu, whether it be Debian, CentOS, if that's your thing. There's just some maintenance that goes involved in keeping that system up to date, keeping that in sync for yourself as well as other developers and friends. All right. So now we get to containers. Similar to virtualization in the fact that it is shareable. There are a number of ways to share a container, and there are multiple containers. Today we're talking about Docker, that's the big one, that's why we're all here. There's also LXC, which is another very popular container platform to use as well. I think Docker, I like Docker, that was the one I was stuck with first. I really like Docker, haven't really messed much with LXC. I know a lot of people have great success with it. I think Platform SH is probably a great example of successful containers using LXC. So other things you can do is app isolation. So the way that Docker works is it shares binaries, shares a lot of the common files that are used across a lot of your images, but the actual apps itself and what are different are its own individual process, and those are isolated. So sandboxing is a thing. When you get rid of a container or remove that, it's gone. I mean, it's there's just one thing with volumes. We'll talk a little bit more about that specifically, but there is once you're done with it, it's gone. I mean, it's a nice way to go in there, tool around. You want to get your space back. You can do that very quickly. And again, while I was saying about shared process, there's a shared kernel. So Docker does work. It works on Linux, natively on Linux. It shares the kernel. There is the Docker engine, which uses the native Linux kernel on your Linux machine. It doesn't require you to use Linux. You can use this on Mac, Windows. It's cross-platform. So that's it works on anything. Different approaches, and just how it works is a little bit different between the two. We're going to get more on that in just a minute too. Yes.
Is there going to be a Docker demo?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah. There's plenty of demos. You wait. You're gonna have a good time. No, there's some fun. We're going to do some Docker Compose stuff and Dockerfile stuff. We're getting to it now. Just kind of the prerequisite. This is Docker. This is kind of how it's different than virtual environments, bare metal stuff. The boilerplate every Docker presentation stuff that has to have. So, but yeah, getting back to the slides here. Low switch cost. Docker's crazy fast as far as spinning up containers and removing them. You don't have to remove if you want to, but spinning them up, it just takes seconds. It's crazy fast. We'll see this in just a minute. Great resource management too, just because we do the way Docker works in sharing binaries and layers among other images that are already on your system. It's really, really good with managing resources. And with some of the apps with Mac and Windows, you're going to be able to very easily change how much memory and CPUs we use for that. All right, so this is the obligatory slide. It's in every single Docker presentation. Kind of what I was just mentioning here. We have containers on the right, virtual environments on the left. This is what's the difference between VirtualBox and Docker. How does that work? Again, we have our container engine that sits directly on top of your operating system for containers. You can have multiple containers running MySQL that share the same binaries and libraries. You have same with Apache, Debian for your operating system. That's shared across the system. Whereas on the virtual environments, you have this thing called a hypervisor, which also sits on top of your operating system, but then you have the entire operating system with each one of those images. Whereas on Docker, you just have that one time, and that's shared among all of the images that are using that. So, all right, so getting closer to where the action is. We want to dive in deeper with Docker, so where do we get started? Generally, the first place people go is Docker Hub. This is the public community, where you find images, where you can host images. Think of the Drupal.org for the Docker community, the Docker world. There's a lot of neat features here, a lot of great images that you can grab. Similar to Git, you can share your images similar to a repository, a Git repository. You can have that public. You can have those as private images. You can share the images, obviously, because we're going there to look for them. And these are just a few of the images that we have down here. Some of the more popular ones. And a lot of these too are not really intended for development. Like for example, the Drupal we'll talk. We'll actually talk about that in just a moment. But some are meant for demonstration purposes more so than actual development purposes. And another cool feature too about we'll talk more about the demonstration purposes. But another cool feature is the automated build repository. So you can actually connect your Docker Hub account or an image with a GitHub repo, and it just automatically gets built as you deploy to the GitHub repo. Really, really cool stuff. But yeah, getting back to that Docker image, if you go to you search for Drupal on Docker Hub, you'll see this page. And what this is, it is a good place to start, but this is mostly intended for demonstration purposes. Somebody wants to see Drupal. What's a Drupal? I don't know what a Drupal is. This is a way that you can go and get Drupal, install Drupal, demonstrate it in a very quick manner. You could use this for development, but generally it's kind of discouraged for the most part. for demonstration purposes. And there are some better tools and better places to start for publicly available Docker libraries and images to get started with. So, all right. So yeah, this is where we're starting to get to the fun stuff. My slides start forgetting much about the images, and because we're getting into the live demos here. So, installing Docker on Linux. There's a little bit of prerequisites. I'm not going to go through the whole installation process, but in some cases, in most cases, it's just as simple as app, sudo apt-get install Docker engine. The other thing is Docker Compose. That's pretty quick too. Again, this is all very well documented, and these slides are online, so I'm writing this down. But it's very quick. You can copy and paste this command, drop it in your terminal, and install Docker Compose. I mean, if you Google how to install Docker on insert my operating system here, you're going to find tons of documentation straight from Docker, the main Docker website, and it'll point you along or guide you along the process for pretty much every single operating system. The other thing is that Docker for Mac. So this is, if you're running Mac, if you're running Windows, they have two versions. So this is Docker for Mac. You need to have a 2010 Mac or newer. Reason for this is that the Intel chip inside of those support hardware virtualization. That's why you need that specific model. I don't know if it's like the mid, early, or late 2010. I think it's 2010 is what I have in my notes here. OS X 10, 11 or newer. That's El Capitan. This comes with a few things. It comes with Docker Engine, which is the main app for Docker. Comes with the command line client. Comes with Docker Compose, and Docker Machine. Docker Compose is a lot of fun. It's just pretty much everything you need to be a out of the box Docker ninja. And really, it's really simple. I mean, you just go download this app. It's a DMG. You drag and drop it. You're done. I mean, it literally takes 5 minutes. Windows has a similar thing. You just go download the installer, install that. It requires 64-bit Windows 10 Professional. The reason why Professional is because Home Edition doesn't come with the Hyper-V feature. That's something that you have to have in order to use Docker for Windows. Docker for Windows is an actual program, so you can still use, if you have an earlier version, you can still use Docker on Windows. It's just Docker for Windows is the specific program that would be recommended if you can use that if you have the hardware. And then there's also virtualization. You have to have that enabled as well, so it's not just the Hyper-V. But yeah, this is really easy. Just install it, follow prompts. It's a very, very traditional Windows installer. Some of the apps, this is very similar. So the left is going to be Windows. This is if you want to share, like which drives and stuff you want to share. Similar to that on the Mac, a little different interface. We've got some of your advanced settings. So if you want to control how many CPUs Docker is using, how much memory Docker is using, you can do that from both of these. So left, this is Windows. This is Mac. Same thing. Same thing there. So getting the Docker Toolbox. Docker Toolbox is great for older machines. If you lack the hardware, you don't have everything there. What Docker Toolbox is it's a VirtualBox image that actually has the version of Linux that you need. Going back to that model that's different between Docker and virtualization, it kind of renders that moot at this point because you are using VirtualBox at that point, but it's not quite as bad. You have VirtualBox, but then you have just one Docker engine on top of that, and then Docker is doing its thing from there forward. So it is a little bit more overhead, but not as much as using like traditional VirtualBox here. So it's really easy to use. Set up, you download it, just install it from Windows, Mac, and Linux as well. And this is the installer for that. So you've got pretty much the same thing you had in the other installers, just includes VirtualBox. So this is getting into data volumes. So now we're getting into the more specific things with Docker. We're still going to get to those live demos here, but just want to mention a few things first. And actually, this is the main one Data volume is essentially where you mount something inside of a drive. So like if you mount or if you run a Docker container, that has files, that has a Drupal site, that has your stuff that you need to get to make edits. A volume is a way for you to mount a directory on that container to a directory on your system. So that way you can access your code, you can access the things you need to change, you can build your site. And we're going to pass some commands. We're going to see that these data volumes, they're initialized when the container is first created. And if you were to use something like that Drupal image from Docker Hub, and you were to mount that Docker, the files would go away. It's kind of a default thing that confuses a lot of people when they first kind of get into Docker mounting some of those publicly available volumes. That happens by design. But one of the things about this is that the data volumes persist when a container is deleted. So if you just were to delete a container, but you didn't mean to, or you weren't quite ready for it, it is a way for you to retrieve that data so you don't feel dumb. You just remove the container and now all the data is gone. So that's a way for you to still get that. There's a few flags you can pass to get that. But Docker Compose, this is where it starts getting a lot of fun. So I'm sorry if I'm putting some of you guys to sleep. But Docker Compose, this is like where all the magic happens. This is where you can take a bunch of different Docker containers, link them together, and make them work with each other. So I can have one container that is running PHP, another one that is running Nginx, another one that's running MariaDB. And these are 3 independent containers. What Docker Compose does is make these work together. It actually links them together so that when you're in, for the most part, a different server is what it's going to feel like, you can still run like drush commands and then run that on the database that's linked to that same container. Yes, sir.
So running them separately, MySQL, Nginx, and PHP in separate containers, for example.
Yep.
Seems like a good thing for production, but is that how most people would do for even development and all that?
Yeah, so it's probably the most common way, yes. And I've got actually examples. That's a fantastic question. I've got examples of both for development in this presentation. So the way I think a way to really understand Docker and to start building your own images, building your own custom workflows for how you're going to use Docker with what you're already used to, going the route of having like Apache or Nginx, whatever your web server is, PHP, MySQL, having that all in that one image is a great way to learn because it's still very familiar. You're still familiar with how to connect to a server, how to install a program or software, and build out what you need. So yeah, there's definitely different ways to go about doing it. There are some advantages to having that separated. Mainly, it's just making sure that you have the most recent versions, making sure that if you're working on a project with a lot of other developers, to make if their environment changes, it's a way that those just the parts of the environment that are being affected can then be modified, deployed, and then when you do like Docker Compose up, it'll pull down just that one those new changes from your remote. So so this is Docker Compose. Works great with CI workflows. You can document and configure op service dependencies. So it's very straightforward to look at one of these files. We're going to look at one in just a second here, but and also you preserve volume data when you do that. So like we were just talking about, if changes happen to a Docker image, you update those changes and those custom revisions on your local volume are going to remain the same. It's not going to overwrite those. That's a feature. So, but again, this is where all the magic happens. This is usually what like hooks people and drags them into Docker Compose. It's really cool, especially when it starts to work. You see it work and you did it yourself. Man, you usually remember that day. It's like it was drush and then it was this. Like that, I remember what I was wearing, what I had for dinner that day. It was pretty wild. So. All right, so I'm getting some of the screenshots here with Docker Compose. So again, I mentioned it's going to be it's pretty straightforward. Docker Compose uses a YAML file to store its configuration. You execute, update this with a simple command, docker compose up. The Attendees for daemon, you can put that on, you can not put that on. I'll show you the difference here in just a moment of what that actually is. When you do a docker compose up Attendees, you'll see it like starts all your containers. And this is, I'm using an example from Docker for Drupal. So this is another popular, if you were just to Google, I want to do some Docker with the Drupals, you're going to find Docker for Drupal. It is a fantastic place to start. They have a very easy to understand, I think. We'll see it. We'll actually look at their Docker compose files here in just a second. Actually, I'm going to look at that right now. It's not a whole lot. We'll go straight to this file in just a moment. We're actually going to go ahead and just do that. And there is, because that, I don't think, you guys can't read that, can you? Yeah, didn't think so. Let's, having this behind me is kind of, yeah, I know, it's like, oh, of course, it's on the other one here. And which the direction of where it's going is the other thing. There we go. All right, so this is just the Docker Compose YAML for Docker for Drupal. I want to make this bigger too, so we can read it in the back there. Can everybody read that? Oh, this thing wants to work now. Awesome. So we've got, when we first initialize, we have our services. Services, this is kind of like the, what wraps everything. So we have, in this heading, we've got MariaDB, we have PHP. So we have our database to be the top. We have the image. So this is the actual MariaDB image. When we mentioned Docker Hub earlier, if you were to go search for this image on Docker Hub, you can download just that image from Docker Hub. You can go there and have documentation on it. It's great. We can set our environment variables for MySQL. They're really secure. They have Drupal. That's your database user and password. That's default. I didn't do that. That's straight default. But it's good to remember. You know what it is. I mean, generally, you can go and change this at any time. This is just a way that you're not going to forget what it is when you create a new Docker environment or new Docker environments. PHP, they're using PHP 7. You can also change this out for 6. So it's just uncomment one, comment out the other one. Site name, site environment, or PHP variables here. Your port that you're setting that to. So this is going to be localhost port 8000. You'll be able to access that PHP container. SynMail, so it uses MailHog by default. MailHog is an app that sits on your server. In this case, a container. It just kind of funnels in all your email. That way, you're not sending out a bunch of emails to potential live site users, but it's coming from your development side. MailHog's great for that. It comes with Docker for Drupal by default. It's fantastic. It sets up our volumes. This is actually where we set so the var tripdub HTML. That is the actual Docker root on that container. We're setting that to basically think of it like a symlink. We're creating a directory. I have a Docker presentation directory. I have an hdocs directory inside of there. That's where I'm mounting that to. When we start this, we'll go there and look at that and do some changes, and we'll see that closer up. This is our web server down here. Nginx, and this is actually a pretty neat thing too. So if you're doing a lot of work with Pantheon, Pantheon doesn't publicly have an Nginx container that you can just go and grab. Docker for Drupal, there might be more, but this is one of the few places where I know I can go and get an Nginx container that is very closely resembling what Pantheon has. Plus they have this PMA, that's PHP MyAdmin. But you also have, there's the MailHog that I was telling you about, but you also have Redis, Memcache, Solr. So I actually ran into this problem a while back, trying to access the Solr instance that's on Pantheon from remote. You can't do it. So having this is really helpful because you're going to have something that's very, very much like that production environmental Pantheon that don't know of any other option to do that other than rolling your own server instance or your own instance of Solr and trying to index that yourself, whether it be local or on its own container. But this just comes with it out of the box. Commented out by default, but you can go change that. Same with Varnish. These are just some of the default settings. So out of the box, Docker for Drupal will have a lot of stuff commented out. And there's our volume. So that's pretty much it for a basic Docker file. We may come back to this in just a moment. Yes?
So is Dockerfiles what's setting up what's going what containers going to spin up first? So
It handles the linking. So like keeping, like, so if you have different images for like say PHP or Nginx, or your database server, what Docker Compose does is links all those together, and allows you to have separate environments. As this other gentleman was mentioning earlier, that having everything in one image too, that is also an option, or in a way you can follow that. But for something like that, use a Docker file, where the Docker files are very specific to a particular image. Docker Compose is a way to kind of link all those together and make them work together. Yes, sir.
So I've heard OpenShift being mentioned in the same context as Docker. Can you just quickly describe what OpenShift is for?
Not real familiar with OpenShift. I can get back to you. I can look it up after, or look up some more and see how that applies and see where it would apply to Docker. But definitely interested in finding out that though. Yeah, so. Oh, it's taking a while. There we go. All right. So, on to the next one. I don't know where my notes went. I apologize for this. There's a certain part where I wanted to jump into the demos. I thought it made the most sense. I don't want to miss that part, because then I'll be out of there. All right, so custom images. This is kind of getting into the point where we were talking about earlier, into building your own image, something that fits your workflow. You can include your own favorite tools. You can add custom scripts. We're going to look into that specifically too. And where to begin? So generally what you would do is start with a base image. This could be from Docker Hub. This can be from a Docker file. You can build it yourself. There's several ways to start, but you need to start with an image somewhere. You need to connect to the container. We're going to do some examples here in just a moment, but you would want to connect to that container, which is, think of it like you're using SSH to connect to a remote server. Similar to that, but instead it's a container on your system. You make some changes, you install stuff. Once you're done with that, you can exit. You commit your changes. It's very similar to Git. So if you're familiar with Git, you'll be right at home. And you push up the Docker Hub. It's very simple, very quick to get into. All right, so Docker pull. This is going to be where you want to pull an image from Docker Hub. You want to take it from that remote server, pull it down to your local environment, just to have it ready so you can cache and create those containers. You've got different versions. So we have Docker pull, which is the main command. We have Docker pull Drupal, which is a very specific container. Well, actually, the latest container is what that's coming from. So if you don't, this next part here, we have this colon latest. That, if you don't put anything, if you just put Docker pull Drupal, it's going to assume you mean the latest tag. You can also specify versions. So this is good if you were to grab, run this command, you're going to grab Drupal 8, the latest version Drupal 8. But if you want to grab the latest version of 7, you can do that too. Just specify a tag. It's good for maintaining separate versions of software. PHP is another example. So like version 7 versus 5.6, you could do that way. Image tags. So again, you would, and you can pull these separately. So like the latest version of Drupal, would be a different pull or a different image than the 754 image, obviously. It would share a lot of the same layers, and like the operating system binaries and libraries, that would be shared, but the difference between Drupal 7 and Drupal 8, that would be different. We'll see there in just a moment, too. We're getting there, I promise. We're finding tags, so if you go to the actual project page, you'll see this link up here for tags. It has all the versions. You find the version, find your tag, grab it there. All right, so then we've got Dockerfiles. So a Docker file, as I was mentioning earlier, this is more specific to the image itself. This is a very, very simple, very basic example. From this, I have a Drupal 8 image that I already have on Docker Hub. It's using that as a base image. Maintainer line, just who you are, who's the author. Environment variables, so like who is the Apache user in this case, tripped up data, where the actual log directory is. We have a script, a startup script. We're going to look closer into this, but this is if you want to include some sort of custom logic after your container is created. Commonly, it's used for, and actually in this example we'll see, we have something as simple as just like starting Apache in MySQL. So it's some simple things you can do with that script, or you can do some pretty crazy stuff too, as we'll also see. You make directories, so if you want to pass certain files from your local system over to that container, you can create a directory and then like copy. So the assets directory is on my Mac in this case, but I want to copy that over to this temp assets directory on the container. Entry point, just some kind of cleanup work. It actually drops you into the work directory here, var trip.html. Pretty straightforward example. And when we build this is if we have like a Docker file and you do Docker build, Docker engine is going to go through each one of those lines one by one, check them. It'll say here using cache. That means there's no changes when this new build happened. We'll just continue to use that. It's using the cache. And in this particular example, nothing really changed. But if anything changed, it'll say updated and have the new hash ID for that particular change. Other commands we'll use Docker PS. So PS is I want to check for active containers. What containers are running on my system? That's Docker PS. You'll get something that looks like this. This will have your image name, the hash we're talking about. That's the container ID. We've got the commands that's running, when it was created, status for it, port forwarding. That's an important thing when you start getting into like custom scripting. Is you have to be mindful of ports. That's another thing too. So you don't want like Xdebug, for example. If you use PHP Storm and you want to use some of the advanced features with that, you want to have a similar port for Xdebug configurations. So if you have multiple running on the same port, you're going to have trouble there. So it's something that's kind of remember when getting into this. And then names. Docker by default will create, if you don't pass it a name or give it a name, it'll create kind of a cheeky name. In this case is Dreamy Minsky. You can also pass the tag A switch. Just basically the same command. Just give it an A switch, and it will show you every container on the system, all the containers on the system, which is a much larger list usually. We're getting there to the live demos. Running a new container. This is if you've already pulled it. You don't have to pull it, but this is you generally want to first. In this case, we're running Docker run. We are passing the D for the daemon means we want to start the container, run background. And there's another option of interactive, which you won't do as much. Some reasons why you do it, but the next option we have here is ports. So in this case, I'm just forwarding port 8021 to port 80. Port 80 is going to be the default port for Apache on the container. That's just mapped to port 8021 in this example. So that way, if you want to look at your site, you get a localhost port 8021, yes.
The -T, what is that?
It's in a lot of commands. If you do Docker help, it's not listed. It's in everyone. I'm not sure at the moment. I would have to go look it up. The important one though is D. So T, you're going to be using that a lot. Docker build tac T, Docker run tac T. You're going to be using a lot of tac Ts. If you do a help or look at the manual, last I looked last night, because that was bugging me too, because I had every other switch documented here. That was the only one. Couldn't find a definitive why you do it, but it's everywhere. You use it a lot. So D is important. That's running as a daemon. So
It just announced 10:30.
is it? Oh, we went too far. All right, so let's. 10:30 is the cutoff, isn't it?
So you can, I mean, you can take a little extra time. It's
Okay.
nice.
All right, so I was thinking take a lot less time, so we'll just go to the fun parts here. Connecting to the container, this is typically how you do this. This is like the SSH part, shelling into it. We'll go to, let's just go to my, okay. Oh, this is going to be interesting. One moment, let me, mirror these screens, so that will make this a lot easier to go through. And I have some scripts. I'll share those. I'll put that on Twitter and show some of these scripts because they really are neat. There's a lot of neat stuff you can do with that. You know, I just want to mirror these screens so I can kind of quickly go through.
Your PowerPoint gonna be online?
Yes, it's on. It's already online. I will. I'll tweet out or I'll send out a. I'll do a tweet that has the links to that to the slides here. This is not where I need to be.
You can edit your sessions. The session node on Drupal camp, you can edit stuff there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I'll definitely go do that. Just trying to get my displays here so I can mirror the screen so I can not have to turn around to see what I'm looking at. Okay. All right, great. So we're going to quickly take a look at some things. I've got let me make this bigger. Everybody read that okay? Okay, so clear screen. Docker for Drupal. So if you go download Docker for Drupal, you're going to notice that we have this Docker compose file. This Docker compose file, we saw it earlier, it defines the environments, it links everything together. Once you have this installed, you can do Docker compose, up.
Still confused.
Dad, what? So what happens when you get there, right? So I'll just do a tac D. I didn't put the trying to hurry, you always miss things there. So what we're going to see here is all these get started, and it's going to start PHP MyAdmin, the database, MariaDB, PHP MailHog, Nginx. That's the default set that we had uncommented. If we do Docker PS, the other command we saw, we can see that these are running. This is kind of running off the screen, but it's there, trust me. So there's port 8000. If we go to port 8000 on our why is it doing that? Okay, so if we go to port 8, dang it, why is it doing that? All sorts of issues here. So that's all right. So localhost port 8000, finally. Okay. If we go to port 8000, we will see waiting for localhost. That's awesome. All right. There's a really cool script that when we stay up late last night working on that I really wanted to show you guys. So there we go. There's the site. We loaded it. It's in the background behind my terminal. So that's a very out of the box, clean Drupal site with an updated title. Hooray!
Alright. Did you just turn it on, or did you completely spin up everything in base?
This I turned on, so I did actually have these images pulled down locally. I thought it would save time last night, and have those pulled down. But yeah, it would just take a little bit longer just to download the images. You're talking about less than a gig, so however fast your internet connection downloads about a gigabyte file, usually how long that takes. Usually just seconds to actually spin it up. We have the other script I was going to show you is getting into custom scripting with this, and this is going to be, I'm going to skip the part about making commits and making changes and kind of building that. It's very well documented on that same documentation at Docker's website. Very easy to follow. It's not on the same page. But the other script is, we'll actually look at this first really quick. So this is the Docker file, the one that we saw in that screenshot. We've already went over that. This is something that is a script that takes Pantheon, Sitezel Pantheon. It uses Terminus to connect to Pantheon to download any site that you have access to, create a Docker image, spin up that image, download the database, download the file system, download everything, create a clone of that site on your local system. That's what this thing does. This is, apologize, we can't go through all the details. I thought we would have more time. I thought I would go through the first part faster, but unfortunately not. There are two scripts here. This is the main script that makes most of the stuff happen. We have this script. It's a helper script to find your open ports so you're not colliding ports. That's what this one does. So going back to our terminal, what we'll do here is, and we'll actually go back to my very quick just to show you some Pantheon sites. That's not. So we have some Pantheon sites there. We'll go through our and scripts and back up Pantheon. So we'll run the script. It will use Terminus. Terminus is a command line tool from Pantheon to interact with a Pantheon site from your local machine. In this case, we've connected this. We've added a sample site called DC4 to 2017. We have Canopy Studios. I'm just going to pick Canopy Studios because that one actually has stuff in it. That's not just a hello world. This is a Drupal site. So in this script, we specify the actual site that we want. It's going to ask us which environment we want to clone. I'm going to say dev, just because I know this one works. It will do things like download the code base. It'll download the file system. It'll download the database. Some things you can change with this would be like stage file proxy, which is a module that you can use not to have to download all the files from a site. And saving space. This script, I got a really big hard drive on what this script normally sits on, so it's not a big deal, but it's something you may want to consider putting on a laptop or your local machine. Pulls that down, and actually while this is happening, let's just take a look at this script again. We'll go over it real quick, because this does take a moment to go through. We have our Pantheon script. Actually, we'll start with the Docker file. Docker file, we've already went over sets basic environment variables. Then we have our startup script, which I don't have loaded, but that effectively just starts Apache and MySQL. And while we're doing that, so as we mentioned, we're still running Docker for Drupal, and if we do Docker PS just to see what containers we have running, we can actually see all these containers from the Docker for Drupal installation here. So we have several containers running at once. We have the Nginx container, PHP container, PHPMyAdmin container, MariaDB, Mailhog, all of those are running at the same time. Go to our script here. It's worked a lot faster when I did this last night too. But I'll let that run. So while this is finishing up, does anyone have any questions? Does anything specific? I'm going to hang out the Genius Bar for a while. If anybody's interested in this, I'll be glad to share this code, give you a more personal demo, something where we actually have a little bit more time. Again, apologize for going over here. And yeah, so it looks like it's still downloading that code base, so I'm probably just going to leave it here. Questions? Yes?
Yeah, we had some issues with getting it to work well on Mac, getting Docker to work well on Mac, and I think it had to do with the file syncing, how that was like a non-issue on Linux.
Yeah. So there's an option. So if you go to, well, we're using Docker for Drupal or just like Docker Engine itself, just Docker period.
I think, yeah, I mean, it was in the context of using it for Drupal, but yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, there are some options that you can pass to it. So Docker for Drupal, for example, if we take a look at, there's this option called Unison Sync. And as you can see here, which is kind of too big, but there's an option that you can pass to this. It is something with Mac OS X. So I mean, I would look into that. Another issue with this too, with Docker for Drupal, was that it was it seemed a little bit slower for that particular instance. Other times I use Docker is pretty quick. So yeah, well, thanks everybody for coming. Please stop by the Genius Bar. I would love to go over and showing some of these examples here. So, yeah. Thanks, guys.
So on the Pantheon side, when you guys spin up a new site on Pantheon, you spin it up, pull it down, do all your dev, and then just push it all back into Pantheon and work on it in Docker?
Oh yeah.
Via Git. So yeah, you would make your changes. You'd pull it down. You spin up the environment. You make your changes. You have version control. You make your commits just like you normally would. You push them up, and that's what you would do.
And same thing with like all the modules and all that as well?
Exactly.
Or,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, it would be just like you do it with a traditional bare metal or virtualization. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. But yeah, so I mean, you would just make some changes there. Oh, here we go. No, it's still on.
Yeah. Wi-Fi's a little slow, so...
Well, no, I'm using. Oh, am I still using these old Wi-Fi from the?
Yep.
I am. Holy crap!
That would be
I've had my.
You've had your hotspot on the whole time?
Son of a bitch. All right. I was wondering why it was so slow. I was like, I was doing this last night.
I was curious because, like, we're...
Hey, buddy. Good to see you. Good seeing you, man.
I almost came to your session.
It was.
And then I saw who was presenting it.
No, man. It was a lot of fun.
Recording go good?
Yeah, the recording it seemed to go well. We did. This seemed to work really well. I've also a live stream.
Yeah.
I haven't actually checked that yet.
Yeah.
Give you like 99 out of 10.
Yeah, and that's. I didn't realize that I was on the student Wi-Fi. I had my hotspot on the whole time.
Yeah.
And I guess from like 2 years ago when I came this last time, I just didn't think of it.
that.
Right, I was like, I'm not going to connect. I'm just going to turn on my Wi-Fi and connect there. But connected to this one right away. Didn't
You know,
realize
when we were watching it, we do it every year. We were watching the network graphs, and we just as soon as Mike put the slide with the password and stuff on it, you just like immediately just. I think it went down to like 250 or something, like 250 kilobytes. It was,
channel.
yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
Reese, I had Reese pull it up. He said